The air is heavy with the weight of grief and longing as two Seneca women hunch over a Ouija board on the Cattaraugus Reservation, not knowing that what would happen next would change their lives forever. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back, or welcome to Mystery Files, where I tell stories of true crime, the paranormal, and the mysterious. Today, I got a really good one for you, and if you can do me a favor, just like the story, that's all you gotta do. Okay, without any further ado, as of now, it's time to slip into a mind that's not our own. Let's go. The younger of the two, Lila Jimerson, is a teacher at the reservation school, and her face was just creased with this worry and anticipation. And the older woman there was named Nancy Bowen, and she was this tribal healer who was called upon this otherworldly tool to contact her late husband, Sassafras Charlie. Yes, I guess throughout history there was somebody actually named Sassafras Charlie. But his sudden death from an unknown illness still haunts her. And so her fingers were gliding over this Ouija board's letters. And as both of their hands were, they start to feel a chill run down their spines. The planchette then suddenly starts to move, and it starts to spell out words from beyond the grave. And it is Charlie himself who speaks through this medium, the board. And with urgency in his tone, he reveals a shocking truth that leaves both the women trembling in fear. The letters that he spelled out in the message said, "They killed me." At this point, Nancy's beliefs were validated. She could never accept that her husband Charlie had just died suddenly and inexplicably. She knew in her heart that there had to be some external factor involved in his death, and now Charlie was actually confirming it. So at this point, feeling a surge of anger and also desperation, she asked the ominous Ouija board question, who did it? At that point, the board begins to move on their own as both of their fingers are stationary, not moving at all. And it spells out an answer that sends shivers down Nancy's spine because the letters come together in a twisted jumble, forming the name C-L-O-T-H-I-L-D-E. Clothild. Nancy was struck with confusion and fear, because she knows nobody by the name of such a strange name. But Charlie's spirit is, however, relentless, providing more information about this killer. An address on Riley Street in Buffalo, and a description of a short, plump woman who had bobbed hair and missing teeth. Now, despite this mounting terror, Nancy's companion, Lila, steps in to confirm her worst fears. And that's when she said that she knows Clothild. It was actually the wife of Henry Marchand, a French sculptor employed by Buffalo Science Museum to create these dioramas depicting Seneca life and culture. And Henry Marchand was not just a diorama maker, he was also a highly respected and sought after artist who attended school in Paris, studying under the great Rodin. The museum's acquisition of him was seen as a major achievement. Now, while his wife, whose name was Clothild, also had artistic ability, she had put her career on hold to raise their 4 children. Now, despite what Charlie said during that Ouija board session, Clothild was not accurately described by his words. Because Clothild Marchand was small, she was sophisticated and refined. In other words, she was perhaps the least likely candidate to have committed a murder on a Seneca shaman. Nancy couldn't help but wonder about all of this as well. I mean, Nancy was struggling just to understand how this cultured French woman could possibly be connected to her deceased husband. I mean, Charlie never got a chance to explain that part, but someone else soon would surely fill in the gaps. Also, if you right now are on the edge of your seat or you just love stories in general, then please make sure to subscribe to myself, Mystery Files, right now, because every week I bring you stories just like this. Okay, back to the story. So like I said, those gaps would be filled in, and Nancy starts to receive these letters. And Nancy's hands are literally trembling as she read the letters, each one signed by a mysterious and ominous Mrs. Dooley. The words on the page seem to writhe and twist like a serpent, revealing a shocking truth. Clothild Marchand was not just a rival, but a witch hell-bent on destroying Sassafras Charlie. At this point, Nancy's heart was just pounding with fear and anger as she learned of the hex and the poison, both attempts at murder. But even worse, the letters revealed that Clothild was far from finished in her wicked schemes, and Nancy could feel the icy grip of terror tighten around her throat as she realized that she herself now was actually in grave danger. Because Nancy was next on the list of her targets, and the thought alone was enough to strike fear into Nancy's heart. So, on March 7th, 1930, Clothild Marchand opened her front door to a knock and was met by this Seneca woman who accused her in broken English of being a witch. At this point, startled, Clothild let out a nervous laugh and assured the woman that she had the wrong person, and that she, of course, had no involvement in this such witchcraft. But that's when Nancy Bowen revealed a hammer from her coat and then launched her attack. Clothild's petite frame was no match for Nancy's brute strength. She could only whimper as she was getting pummeled mercilessly, each blow like a sledgehammer to her fragile body. And at this point, as Clothild lay on the ground, barely conscious at all, Nancy reached into her pocket and pulled out a cloth soaked in this sickly wet liquid, and the smell of chloroform filled the air, suffocating Clothild even further. And with one final act of cruelty, Nancy forced the cloth of chloroform down her victim's throat, sealing her fate. And when Clothild's 12-year-old son returned home from school, he found his mother lifeless, just laying there on the floor, a victim of Nancy's calculated brutality. And I promised all of you, stay to the very end because you will get a payoff, I promise. So at this point, the police, of course, started their investigation, and they quickly discovered that 2 Native American women had been observing the house before the murder occurred. And this led them to question Henry Marchand, who had recently worked at the Cattaraugus Reservation, about possible motives for someone from the reservation to kill his wife. And at that point, without hesitation, Henry then said the name Lila Jimerson, whom he claimed was one of his modeling subjects. So, in a matter of hours, both Jimerson and Bowen were handcuffed and escorted into custody. And the case had already been shocking, but it was about to take a twisted turn into the realm of tabloids. You see, as it turned out, Lila Jimerson was not just a model for Henry Marchand, no. She was also his secret lover. And she was far from the only one. It was discovered that the sculptor had been using his position of power to manipulate and exploit numerous Native women. And when confronted with these accusations, Marchand showed little remorse or denial. According to him, it was all in the name of art. He needed these women to bare their full body so he could capture them in their natural state. And he said the only way he could achieve such things is through seduction. Shockingly, his wife, Clothild, knew about his philandering ways and had accepted them as part of the marriage. So at this point, the police were left to wonder the implications of Henry Marchand's affair with one of the women suspected of murdering his wife. Did this mean that Marchand was innocent, or did it suggest that he may be involved in this plot? So Marchand, of course, vehemently denied any involvement, declaring his undenying love for the late Clothild. However, Lila's family had a different perspective on the matter, presenting a substantial collection of love letters written by Marchand to the accused murder suspect. And Lila even took it a step further, claiming that Marchand had dropped hints of wanting Clothild gone. This did not reflect well on the recently widowed man. However, Henry Marchand was not the one being charged with murder. That was Lila Jimerson and her accomplice, Nancy Bowen. And remember, all of this started because of a Ouija board encounter where Nancy Bowen's husband, Charlie, came through the Ouija board. And with a sickening pace, this case quickly headed to court. And many were anticipating a rigged trial and a quick sentencing for the two women to death. And the media did not show any sympathy towards the accused. In fact, Bowen and Jimerson were portrayed as these uncivilized savages in the newspaper, despite Lila being an educated woman. That's just how they were looked at the time because they were Native women. In a mere 17 days after the murder, a jury was selected and Buffalo's most scandalous trial in recent memory began. And Nancy Bowen's involvement was not in question. Even she admitted to striking Clothild with the hammer and forcing the chloroform down her throat. However, Nancy argued that she was not in control of her actions at that time, claiming that these supernatural forces compelled her to commit the murder, such as the spirit of the Ouija board. Now, the defense's argument, of course, seemed weak and unlikely to convince anyone. However, the prosecution made a crucial mistake by calling Henry Marchand to testify, because the Frenchman came across as this arrogant and condescending man openly boasting about his exploits with the native women. He claimed it was quote-unquote easy to seduce them because Indians love to go for a ride in an automobile. Yeah, he said that. His comments were deemed offensive and even racist in that less progressive era. And the public was slowly shifting in the favor of the defendant. But then there was another twist. During the trial, Lila Jimerson became sick with tuberculosis, causing a mistrial to be declared by the judge. And when the case came back to court 1 year later, Henry Marchand decided not to come back as a witness. The prosecution at that point had learned their lesson, and in his absence, Lila Jimerson was found not guilty of murder, and Nancy Bowen accepted a plea deal for manslaughter, resulting in her release after serving some time. Henry Marchand lost his commission with the Buffalo Science Museum due to the scandal surrounding his wife's death. But, of course, he bounced back, marrying his deceased wife's niece and gaining a lucrative commission for the Chicago's World Fair in 1933. But wait, it's not over. The ending is still coming. Okay, so Marchand, he ended up passing away in 1951, leaving behind two sons who became renowned sculptors. The fate of Nancy Bowen, however, is still unknown after she was released. But Lila ended up getting married and living out her life in Perrysburg, New York until she died at 78 years old in 1972. But the major twist here was that Lila Jimerson, Nancy's supposed friend, influenced Nancy to kill Lila's love rival by using the Ouija board to falsely accuse Clothild Marchand of murdering Nancy's husband, Sassafras Charlie. That's right, there were no mystical spirits that were controlling that Ouija board. It was just Lila's hands doing all the work and her emotions guiding Nancy to a horrendous act. And it was all part of Lila's diabolical plan to get Clothild out of the way so she could be with Henry. And she knew that she could take advantage of Nancy, who had just lost her husband and was in a very sensitive state. Pretty diabolical if you think about it. But to ensure the success of her plan, once, Nancy started to question things, she had also written all the letters under the name Mrs. Dooley to push the oblivious Nancy over the edge until she snapped. So Lila was the one on the Ouija board, and she was Mrs. Dooley. And Lila had been just sitting there, waiting for that moment. We know this now because it was Lila who had also been the one to purchase the murder weapons, a hammer and chloroform. This was a crazy one, right? Well, the moral of the story is never let a Ouija board dictate who you are going to murder. That's all I got for you guys. Make sure to join Patreon or the join button and check out my merch below, or watch one of these videos right here. I love y'all. I'll see you next time. Cheers.